In this lesson, we will be discussing the data conversion transform. The data conversion transform is very similar to the T-SQL functions cast or convert that you would use when writing a T-SQL statement. The data conversion transform is a synchronous transform, which essentially means that no rows are held or blocked, and typically this transform performs quickly with not too much impact on your data flow. The difference between this and an asynchronous transform would be as an asynchronous transform brings in rows, it holds them until it's done performing the operation. So as I said, the synchronous transform, this one is minimal performance impact. A typical situation that you would use a data conversion transform is with an Excel source. Now, SSIS does accept Excel sources, and generally it'll try and figure out what kind of data types the Excel file has, but generally it's always wrong. So generally what you'll have to do is with the Excel source, add a data conversion transform directly after it, and convert the data types that SSIS tries to interpret inside the Excel file to the correct ones that you actually intended for it to be. And we're going to demo that in just a moment. The last thing we have here is the fast parse option. When you think about fast parse, we talked about this in our lesson 14 with the flat file source. Now, in this circumstance, it's going to do the same thing that it did in the flat file source to the data conversion transform. If you remember, the fast parse option bypassed validating the columns. So you would select column by column which data or which columns you decided you did not want SSIS to validate. You would generally only do this if you really trust the data that you're bringing in. Otherwise, you would not do the fast parse option. And again, this is kind of hidden. It's a special function which you'll find in the advanced editor. And like I said, you have to do it on a column by column basis. You'll see here we have a conversion chart, which you also have in the book, which gives you a good idea of what a data type would be in SQL Server and how it is related to an SSIS. So if you take a look at this, it's also in your book, but this really will help you when you're trying to determine what data type you need to select in SSIS so you get the right results in your actual database. Alright, so we're ready to begin. I already hinted at what we're going to be doing in this lesson. We're going to be using the data conversion transform with the Excel source. And if you remember what I talked about in the first slide, SSIS will try to determine the correct data types for the Excel source, but generally it's always wrong. It's just about always wrong. So we create a new package, and we're going to go ahead and rename it, give it some kind of significant name. We'll just call this Lesson 16. And remember, we always want to rename the object as well, so hit yes. Alright, so our first step is we need to go ahead and bring over a data flow. Remember, all of these lessons are involving the data flow. So drag your data flow over. And in past lessons, I think I initialed the data flow as DFT. Remember I said you could do DFT or DF. I'll just do DF this time. And let's call it data conversion. Alright, once you've renamed it, go ahead and enter your data flow by either hitting the data flow tab or the actual data flow task. I'm going to go ahead and hit the task. Alright, and if you remember, I said we're going to be using an Excel source. So to do that, go ahead and from your toolbox, bring over an Excel source. And once you brought that over, let's rename that. It's best to rename everything so it means something. If you're worked at a job for a while and you don't rename all these things and you leave and someone comes in after you, they might struggle and try and figure out what you had going on if you don't rename everything, something somewhat significant at least. So I'm going to name this Excel SRC for source and inventory worksheet. That's the Excel file we'll be pulling our data from. Alright, if you don't remember, the next step is going to be to set our connection manager. And to do that, we'll double click inside the Excel source. And you'll see we don't have a connection manager created yet, so we'll do a new one. You can either click new here, or in your connection managers you can right click and create a new one there. We'll do it from here this time. Alright, so now we're going to find the path where our Excel file is located. And it just so happens it was on the first screen I brought up. So go ahead and double click on the Excel file. And we're going to leave this option checked. It says first row has column names. And in our case that is correct. So we'll leave that as it is. So go ahead and hit OK. Alright, so we're going to select the sheet that we're using from within the Excel file. And in this case, it's going to be inventory underscore worksheet. So go ahead and select that option. Alright, now that we have that, you can check out the columns if you'd like, just to see which all of the columns we're bringing back. Everything looks okay there, so let's go ahead and hit OK. And we already know, because I've told you, and after reading this section, you're experienced with reasons why we would want to use a data conversion transform. And we have this Excel source, and I'm telling you now that if you have an Excel source, you're 90% chance you're going to have to use a data conversion transform. So let's go ahead and bring that over with the data conversion. Alright, just click and drag that over, and then you'll connect the green arrows. Alright, so now we're ready to dig into our data conversion transform by double clicking on it. And we're going to select all of our columns in this case. So check each individual column, or you can select the top to select all of the columns. Now that we have the column selected that we want to convert, let's give each of the new columns a different name, just so we can tell the difference. And to do that, this time we'll name each of them converted, and then the rest of the name of the column. So I'm just going to copy and paste that to each of these. Alright, now that I have that, this just is our input is gonna be the regular column names, and what spit out the result of the data conversion transform is the column names are gonna be converted, and then whatever the column name is, just so we can tell the difference. Okay, a couple of changes we have here. You'll notice right away that the problem that I told you that we'd have with the Excel source is it gave our string columns, it made it Unicode, and that's not what we want. If we actually loaded this into a table right now, it would be an varchar column, and typically you'll just use a regular varchar, or at least in our circumstance here, we're going to use regular varchar. So what we need to do first, we're going to convert each all of these to a different data type. Let me expand this a little bit more so we can see each of the options. And remember, you have that conversion chart that we looked at in the beginning, so that you can tell what each is relative to in SQL Server. So for each of the floating ones it has here, we're going to convert those to ints, and we're going to do it with this one right here, the 4-bit signed integer. So convert each of the integers to that just by going to the drop down and selecting it. And I left this Unicode one for last. We're going to convert that to string. Simple as that. Now the output of each of these is going to be named the converted column name, and then it's going to convert it to these data types that we just told it. So we're ready to continue. Go ahead and hit OK. And we're going to put this into a SQL server that's on your box, the AdventureWorks. So let's go ahead and bring over a destination, the OLEDB destination. Simply click and drag that over. And you'll want to go ahead and connect the data conversion. So the output of the data conversion is going to go into your OLEDB destination. And if you remember that the first one we did our new connection manager here for our OLEDB destination. Let's do it a different way. Let's do it down here. Remember, you need a connection manager for sources and destinations. So we're going to create a new OLEDB destination. And it just so happens that we have our location that we're trying to load to. But in case this isn't the first chapter that in case this is the first chapter that you're viewing, I'm going to delete it and show you how to create a new one again. So you'll simply type in your server name, or you can go to the drop down and it'll detect the servers that are on your network. That's me. And then we'll select the database we want to use, which in this case is AdventureWorks 2008. Always test your connection. Looks good. And hit OK. OK one last time. And then we'll change the name of our connection manager to just read AdventureWorks. Alright, so let's go into our OLEDB destination. And I'm just going to quickly copy and paste something over for the demo purposes. We're going to create a new table. We're going to load this into a brand new table that we don't already have on AdventureWorks. To do that, you'll hit New. And then it'll try and populate the fields that you're bringing down into a possible table here. But this isn't exactly what we're looking for. We don't want duplicate columns that say converted and not converted. So I'm going to copy and paste this on here, just the original column names. And let everything looks okay here. So we're going to hit OK, and this will create the table on the fly in SSIS on the AdventureWorks 2008 database. Alright, so the next step will be, of course, as we do in all our destinations, tell you to check out your mapping. So we need to go to the mapping tab over here. And we'll see we have all kinds of stuff that it might look like it's what we want, but it's not. So the first, remember that we converted all of these columns to these converted product ID, converted location ID. And right now it's still mapping our old columns, our old unconverted columns, to our destination. So let's delete each of these. Select them and then hit delete. And then we'll connect them to our converted column. That's the reason we renamed them, so that we could tell the difference between the originals and the converted. So we'll bring over product ID, location ID, physical count, bin, and shelf. If you remember, these don't necessarily have to be directly across from each other. The arrows can cross. As long as you have the column matched up to the name that you want, then it will insert it into that. Okay, so we're ready, I think, to execute this. Let's go ahead and click OK. Oh, and one last thing that I told you that we would discuss, which I can't forget about, is the fast parse option with the data conversion transform. To enable fast parse, right-click on the data conversion transform. Say you want to show advanced editor. Remember, I said this is a little bit hidden, and like I said before, this is just like you would enable it with a flat file source. So we're going to go in the input and output properties, data conversion output, and then you'll select the columns that you want to enable fast parse for. Just like that. And we're going to execute the whole package. I'll go back to the control flow here. And we could either hit the start debugging, or it's good to make it a best practice to right click on the package name and execute package. So let's see our results here. You see it went from yellow to green. And let's see how many rows we moved. We moved 2,138 rows from our Excel file. We converted it. We converted the columns that were coming in from the Unicode. And then we landed our data into a SQL Server destination, or a SQL Server table. So that's using the data conversion transform. Now let's wrap up what we learned in this lesson. So we learned the data conversion transform is similar to the cast or the convert function in T-SQL. It's used much the same way. It is a synchronous transform, which means it's not blocking and it is not going to hurt our performance very much. And we also experienced a common reason of why we would use a data conversion transform, which in this case was the Excel source. We also briefly explored the fast parse option, so we could increase our performance that way by not validating the columns that we're bringing through. And that covers the data conversion transform.